We do appreciate it. Let's spin to the other major news story of the day. The final, or at least what we're told may be the final, end to any talk of Britain leaving the European Union in what is more commonly known as the Brexit decision. And we begin with the deep dirt on what is or is not going to happen from Miranda Khan.
Should we stay or should we go? It's not just a popular song from the British band The Clash. It's what Brits will consider tomorrow when they vote on whether to stay or Brexit, as it's been referred to, from the European Union.
Go out and vote Remain for a bigger, better Britain.
British leaders traveled the island today pushing for and against Britain leaving the EU.
I want us tomorrow to vote for Britain to become independent.
Right now, the numbers are split down the middle, meaning the decision could come down to the remaining 9% who haven't made up their minds.
It will be a big moment for democracy in this country.
Say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome.
The two main issues driving Brexit are immigration and the economy.
We're better if we do it together.
The City of London, the International Monetary Fund, and several businesses want the country to stay over fears that leaving would plunge Britain into a recession, costing the country jobs. But other pro-Brexit leaders say London must regain control of its own destiny because Brussels, the de facto capital of the EU, has too much power.
Brussels runs our lives. 60% of the law of our country coming from Brussels. Our entire fisheries controlled by Brussels.
Britain's growing nationalism runs parallel to what we're seeing here at home with the rise of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. The Brexit vote takes place tomorrow, 1 week after the murder of British lawmaker Jo Cox, who wanted her country to stay in the EU. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Miranda. Now, from the learned perspective on what this all means, welcome British native of Northern Ireland, online national columnist for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, also author of Cycles of Change, Martin Sieff. Martin, thanks so much for joining us. Let me get right up top and get your opinion. What do you think will happen in the vote?
It's going to be a toss-up. You can put the coin either way. The data we have from the most recent polling tends towards Brexit. Even though Jo Cox supported staying in the EU and there was a surge of sympathy on her behalf, polls since then show the dynamism moving in the other direction. But there's always a last-minute strong surge in referenda like this that are not picked up by the opinion polls. So we could have a more decisive result either for staying in or going out than people expect.
Why are there such deep signs of anger against the European Union?
I think it's the same forces, as your correspondent rightly said, that are pushing both the Saunders campaign and very much the Donald Trump campaign here. Democracy has been breaking down in Britain because sovereignty was shifted to Brussels. The Brussels bureaucrats in the European Commission are not accountable to the really weak, vague, almost jellyfish of a parliament in Strasbourg. The British have no control over their own destiny anymore, no control over immigration policies. There is a strong sense of powerlessness and dangerous drift in Britain.
Is the sense here then that David Cameron and others misread that sense of nationalism, growing nationalism in Europe, and you mentioned Donald Trump, much like people here in America misread what Trump was doing with that exact same issue of national feeling?
I think that's exactly right. The liberal elite in Britain made the same mistake as the bi-coastal liberal elites in America did in New York and LA. They forgot that in America there is a great nation between Los Angeles and New York City and Washington. The British elites in London, and Britain is a much more centralized country than America is, made the same mistake.
What about those people, though, who fear that if Britain does indeed leave, this is going to be a domino effect here? This will kick off an unraveling of the entire European Union, and it will destroy economies not only in European countries, but in America and around the world.
It's less likely to do that in America. Even if there is disruption in Europe, America's relative advantage, being more coherent than the European states are, is likely to improve. The bottom line is that the European Union is highly socialist, highly bureaucratic, highly centralized, and European economies have been in a tailspin for more than a decade. Britain is relatively more competitive than the main continental economies because she hasn't gone into the euro financial zone, and because she's had relatively more conservative free market policies.
Martin, with about 30 seconds left, do you get the feeling that regardless of what happens in this vote tomorrow, this is not the final word on Britain and the European Union?
You're absolutely right. The European Union is unraveling. It cannot hold. This may set off the avalanche. Even if it does not, other things will set off the avalanche. But to change the metaphor, we can see the way the wind is blowing.
I think the thing that we talked about here is absolutely true. Once again, politicians misreading what's happening at the ground level in America and certainly in Britain as well. Martin Sieff, we very much appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. The one group of voters Donald Trump desperately needs to vote for him. He's going after them. He's telling them that I am the guy that you want. But what about the discourse that is now being raised in their ranks on compromising their values? We'll get to that, your phone calls, and a lot more when the Hardline continues.